You did that.
Recording.
This is the Conservation Commission meeting on 7/12/2021. It's 5:30 p.m. and the meeting shall commence. We have a quorum, including my Melissa Welsh, Joe Pierce, Howard Hall, Peter Tapcart, and that makes, I think that's all. That makes 5 of us, so we're all set. We have a guest of Monty, who's a local lawyer, to discuss issues. The first issue that we have here is the minutes of the previous meeting from June 14th, 2021. Does anybody have any questions about those? We need to adopt them then. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, raise their hand, please.
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Next order of business is the petition of the Sun Corporation, which is old business, which has been carried on for several months now, of a solar farm on West Main Road. I talked with Ron Walensky, who's the planner, earlier this week. He said that was going to be continued. If somebody knows something different, please let me know. You said, Warren, somebody might be here to talk about that?
Yes, I've let David Martland in to address that if he has anything to say.
All right.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, members of the commission. David Martland. I actually hadn't intended on saying anything. I was going to listen in on the Campos petition, but with respect to that matter may be continued another month. We have provided some information to the town solicitor for a proposed amended sewer easement and a plan associated with that, a title search. We've also submitted a proposed subordination agreement for the lender to subordinate its interest relative to the proposed amended sewer easement. All that is being reviewed by Mr. Regan in his office. And so I anticipate hopefully that can be concluded within the next month. And so we respectfully request that this be continued 1 month.
Without objection, I propose we continue this until next month and see what occurs at that point. Anybody disagree? No, and we'll continue that till next. The new business, one of them, was reconsideration of a proposal by the Campos subdivision over we discussed this back in, I think it was March of 2020, and had a preliminary plan at that point. And apparently they're requesting a rediscussion of that with various changes in the plan or refinement of the plan to discuss that. So I'm asking for perhaps Lynn Small or an engineer to discuss what the changes have been we need to discuss.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, J. Russell Jackson on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Campos. Lynn Small's here with me this evening. So yes, your recollection is right. We were before you last year before we secured master plan approval with the planning board on a conventional 5-lot subdivision. So since that time, the application for preliminary plan approval has been put together and submitted. And so now we're before you for review of the preliminary plan. And so Lynn Small is here and can speak in much more detail regarding that.
Good
Lynn?
evening. Nice seeing you all. It's been a while. Right, so as Russ mentioned, we came to you last time for this subdivision, but we were at a master plan level. Since then, we have done the engineering design work and submitted to the planning department for preliminary plan review. So the stormwater grading, utilities, roadway design, all of that work has now been done. If you want, I can share my screen and go through the plans for you.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Okay. You're gonna get to see this again. Not too far from now. You are screen sharing. Okay, so you should have received a copy of this plan in your packets or digital or however that's being done these days. We have our general notes. Here's an existing conditions plan to just to recap. I'm sure you've seen this. This was part of the master plan submission that we sent. I think it was kind of a year ago now. But just as a quick recap, we have 2 existing lots of record. The total land area is about 9.1 acres when you take those together. Serenity Drive ends in a cul-de-sac within these 2 properties, which would be serviced from individual driveways right now. There's an existing sewer easement that runs down the property line and ties into Maidford River Road. We have a wetland series towards the rear portion of the site, which is your east side, that comes off of that the Maidford River stream there. The 200-foot riverbank wetland. Can you see my hand, my little hand? Okay, that is your 200-foot riverbank wetland offset line. The wetlands, the freshwater wetlands associated with the property extend farther into the site than that 200-foot riverbank wetland. And then on top of that wetland feature, we have a 50-foot perimeter wetland. There's a small isolated wetland in your northeastern portion, northwest, I always have to do this, the northwest portion of the site, and that one is too small to be subject to a perimeter wetland by state ordinance or the state regulations. The site is an R40 zoning district. By land area and developable land area calculations, the site would support, I believe it came out to 7 or 8 lots by density. We worked with the owners and they decided to propose a reduced density project and only have 5 lots. So here's the subdivision layout plan. We have a lot, 5 lots that go around the proposed right-of-way, which is an extension of Serenity Drive that you can see here on this plan. Now, what we're doing to try to help offset some of the impacts because it's agreeably a sensitive site where it drains towards the Maidford River and its associated wetlands. So we want to make sure that we minimize any impervious as much as possible. So besides reducing the density of this project, we also reduce the roadway length as much as we could while still providing direct access to the roadway to each of the lots. So if you can see here on the plan, this round circle here, this is where if we were going to do a conventional roadway for full length of frontage on all of the lots, we would bring that pavement all the way up here. We worked with the planning board and took the York Conservation Commission board's comments into account when we did the design work and shortened that impervious surface up. So we are providing enough depth into the site so that each property can be accessed from the cul-de-sac or the new roadway with its own driveway. So we have no shared driveway for this, but it does have reduced paved frontage. So it's kind of a win-win for fire safety where we have direct access to the main roadway, but reduced impervious to minimize any additional runoff to the drainage, to the wetland area. Sorry about that. One of the other things that we had been asked to incorporate into the design, and I'm not honestly sure if it was this board or if it was a planning board or if it was both, was to investigate the feasibility of doing a water main extension. Now, we are proposing to do a water main extension from Compton View Drive. I did receive some notice, well, through the planning department, that Newport Water would require some revisions to this layout in order to approve it as an extension, but they're fine with the idea of having the extension. So we have to make those revisions to the plan once we meet with them, but we do have municipal water intended to be brought to the site. We also have municipal sewer. Unfortunately, the existing sewer line doesn't line up well with how the project's going to end up. So that line's going to be removed, and we're going to put in a new sewer main connection for the property, which will continue to connect to the Maidford River Road. So all 5 lots will have municipal water and sewer. The stormwater design for the project, basically the entire site drains towards that Maidford River wetland. We're going to provide pre-treatment, water quality treatment, and then mitigate your peak runoff from the development. Pre-treatment, we're going to separate the sediments and the oils that are collected in the solids through a hydrodynamic separator. And then we'll be going to provide our water quality treatment through a series of swales and a sand filter. That's what this is. And then once we get that water quality treatment, we'll be mitigating the stormwater runoff from the site within the detention basin. So the project reduces the peak runoff for all your design storms from existing to proposed. So we will not be proposing an increase in the runoff.
Can I ask a question? Can you go over again, what all empties into that sand basin there? Is it
Sorry.
just runoff from that adjacent land, or do the ponds and the swales feed into that sand stone also?
So what happens is basically the water that's collected in the roadways is going to go through a hydrodynamic separator, and it's going to be piped into the sand filter that's here. And that will overflow into the detention basin. Rooftop areas, and I guess it's just rooftop areas within the site, will be captured in uncaptured rooftop areas. Anything that's not captured within the roadway drainage system will be captured in from this swale that's located on lot 3, or the swale that's located to the rear of lots 4 and 5. Those will provide the water quality treatment, and then they will discharge to the detention basin. And then this triangular typed basin that's farthest down the hill, that's the one that provides the metered outfall so we can control your peak runoff.
All right, so those ponds that are indicated there, they have water treatment capabilities within.
Yeah, so these ones that are running alongside the wetland area and then intersecting anything that's going towards Maidford River, Maidford River Road, sorry, will provide some water quality treatment and convey that stormwater to the detention basin.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, that basically sums up the designs. The rest of the plans, we include your soil erosion and sediment control. So during construction, when we're going to make sure there's no sediments that run off to adjacent properties. This is a requirement for all developments in Middletown. And then we have our road profile on the next sheets. And then just details for the project.
Issue with runoff from property to the adjacent properties?
I'm sorry, do we
Is
deal
there
with
a current? So there's no issue before construction in that land? The runoff? Are you
No, I mean,
by
this,
the development?
when they there was a concern on the site with runoff from this property. The neighbors on Maidford River Road felt that this property was draining into their property. If that was happening, we believe that that was a result of when they put that sewer line in for the previous subdivision. And they took out a stone wall that was located at the end of this roadway. And I
Mhm.
believe that's been temporarily constructed with a berm.
Okay. So are you improving the drainage with this construction project?
Yes, this project will provide full water quality treatment for all your impervious surfaces, and you will have a reduction in your peak runoff.
Okay.
Lynn, I have a question.
Yes.
A couple, actually. Describe the grade or the topography there going from Serenity Drive kind of left to right, which is west to east across the site in this developed condition. You said all the water tends to flow to the east, which is to the right side of the screen here. So that's question number one, if you can describe that. Number two, so these systems will capture runoff from the driveways, or the driveways will be kind of material of homeowner choice, or pervious or impervious? You know, will they be gravel driveways? Will they be asphalt? Is that subject to be determined down the road, or what?
So, right, usually what happens is we do the design with placeholders for houses and driveways. And then if the construction of the individual lots exceed that amount of impervious, they're going to be required to mitigate that on their own. And we'll be able to control that through the soil erosion sediment control plan process. It's proven to be successful, I believe, with the last projects. We got the Middle Creek project that we did this for, Saltwood Farm project that's in the process where we're doing that for. And you have a very straightforward, this is where you're allowed, and if you do more, then you have to mitigate it on your own. And it seems to be working well. For this project, we have 3,000 square feet of footprint for the homes, and I believe we allow for up to 4,500 square feet of impervious, but I need to just double check that in our stormwater regulations. So, I'm sorry, in our stormwater design, I believe we allow for up to 4,500 square feet of impervious area per lot in our design. So the houses could get bigger, but they would have to do a pervious driveway, or they can do a paved driveway if it's less than 1,500 square feet. The grading for the site, we start at elevation 121 or 122 right here at your westernmost point. And then it's a constant slope down. Your cul-de-sac goes down to about 111 at your,
All right.
maybe 111 and a half at your catch basin. That's right at the end of the site. By the time you get to your wetland, you're down to closer to 100. So there's a decent grade change across this site, which gives us some opportunities to provide stormwater. It's harder to design a drainage system on a flat site than one with a slope. This one is a little bit, it's pretty steady, the slope across the site.
Who's responsible for maintaining these systems?
So what happens with these kind of projects is that once we go through the permitting process, we are going to have to establish a homeowners association, which Russ will put together, and it actually gets recorded, I believe, and it ends up making the homeowner. So these 5 homeowners are going to be responsible for maintaining the drainage system. The roadway is intended to be public, so those utilities are town utilities. There will be easements put in place if the homeowners default on maintaining the systems. There's mechanisms in place where the town can come in and do it and back charge the owners. Because we want to make sure we don't create any adverse impacts on the theceiving waters.
Okay. All right.
That was a very important question that I was going to ask you myself. And the answer that you provided is exactly what I hoped you would say.
Great.
I have a question myself on the swale number 2 on the northeastern part of the property. Why can't that extend a little farther north than what it does right now? Because it looks to me like there's about 125 feet of, you can't see the full thing on your drawing there, but now it is. But it looks like there's about 125 feet of uncontrolled boundary. They're receiving runoff from a large open space area that will flow unmitigated into the wetlands area. So is there any reason why you can't or didn't want to extend that a little farther north?
I mean, the goal is to capture the impervious area. We can extend it further north. It's just going to intercept more of the runoff that goes through the wetlands. So we'd have to evaluate to make sure that doesn't have any adverse impacts on, you know, the outfall that we're getting from the drainage system. Because we'll be putting more water in it if we're intercepting just runoff from grass, you know.
I was just a little bit concerned. There is a note on drawings which said, I believe this is true. It says all soils on the site are considered low permeability soils. So you're probably going to get a pretty fair amount of runoff occurring.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. These soils, I mean, many of the soils on Aquinic Island are considered low permeability. You can infiltrate into them. I mean, we have septic systems on all of Portsmouth and, you know, a good portion of Middletown and a good portion of Newport. So the soils do infiltrate, but they are not very permeable. So it's not an ideal situation. We're not relying on infiltration for any of these systems.
Okay, but you're not concerned about excessive flow into the wetlands from that northern section of the property?
No, I mean, it was modeled. So we modeled what was captured in the swale and then what was draining direct into the wetland. We don't just model what we're capturing. We model also the uncaptured areas.
Okay. All right, I have one more question near the southern part of the property where you've got that that other ponding area there. How come ponding area only 8 feet deep where the one up north is 12 feet?
Inches.
8 inches.
Inches.
8 inches, I'm sorry. Yeah, but itself and 12 inches up in the northern one. Seems to me like you could get a appreciable amount of runoff on down between houses into that pond area. And did they consider, is there a reason for going with an 8-inch depth as opposed to 12-inch depth?
It's just the value, the water quality requirement for this contributing area is less than on the north side. You have 3 houses going into this one. You have 2 going into the southern one. So it's just, and you know, most of the lot, what is this, 4 goes directly into the sand filter. So this is really sized for a much smaller contributing area of impervious.
The models show that what proposed there is going to be adequate.
Yes, and I mean, I should say this project went through DEM review for, they reviewed the stormwater. We sent it in for a RIPD's permit and wetlands permit. So they did do that combined review. They came back with comments and we made the revisions. Basically, their comments resulted in us making the sand filter bigger than what we had originally designed for it. The stormwater system got slightly larger, but you know, they were generally okay with the layout. Not that they pay a lot of attention with that. Mostly they do a review of the stormwater system and then the sediment control features that we have.
Lynn, you mentioned a hydrodynamic separator. Excuse my ignorance, what is that?
So a hydrodynamic separator is basically a tank that kind of has a baffle in it. So it works a lot like a sump on a catch basin, but more efficiently. So you get a lot more soil sediment removal from the water flows through. It goes through a baffle. The sediments accumulate in the chamber, and then the water without the sediments continues down and goes into the sand filter. You would have to pump out the sediments after a year or so that collect into the hydrodynamic separator. It really depends on how much sand ends up on this roadway and how often that needs to be done. And we do have an operation and maintenance manual that we will, we used it for part of our state permitting. It's submitted to the town as part of the town permitting, and it'll be on record for the homeowners when they take over the maintenance of the drainage system.
Okay. So that's something the homeowners association would be responsible for, and
That would be part of the drainage system that they would take over.
they would
the
they would
maintenance
take
of.
care of. Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, hi, Lynn. I recently heard from a resident who lives in the Madrid River Road area that several months ago, around about March, a number of trees were cut down, between 40 or 50 trees in that southern part of the property. And I'm wondering if you know the reason for that. Was that part of the preparation for the detention ponds? Or if not, was there a reason for cutting those trees down? And is there any plan to return trees to that area? Because the trees were providing some screening from the development. And so I'm just wondering what the plan is there.
I don't know how they plan on landscaping the back portions of those properties. We would have to have those trees removed for construction of the drainage features. I know that they had done that work after they had gotten the state permit, so that clearing is technically permittable at that point. I'm not sure if they did any grubbing or if they were just cutting at that point, but they did stop when they found out some of the neighbors had concerns. We felt that it was important to make sure the town's on board with the project in its entirety before we do any piece of construction, you know, even though that was allowed by the state permits, we didn't want to take any chance to create, you know, tension with any of the neighbors.
And so far, as you say, it's just been cutting, not grubbing out the roots or anything. So the trees, the stumps that are there are sort of leafing out again. So I just wondered, you know, if that is the plan, I think that'd be helpful to make sure the neighbors know that that's the reason that the trees are being cut. But also if there is any plan to return any trees that would provide screening, that would be helpful. I don't know if this is something the Conservation Commission can weigh in on, to maybe put in a recommendation that trees not be removed unless they're necessary for part of the project. But if there's something like that that we can suggest, that might be something to put forward.
Would you like to ask for a tree plan for the eastern part of the project?
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Actually, the sort of southern part is where I think the trees were planted, but if there is a tree plan for the whole project, that would be useful to see. And I understand that there are street trees planned based on previous discussions, but if there's a broader plan, I think that would be helpful to see.
So normally for a project like this is a residential subdivision. There's nothing in the town. I can talk to the owners about your comments, of course. But there's nothing in the town ordinance that requires homeowners to do a certain amount of land. They don't submit landscape plans to the town as part of their lot development. We do have to submit for street trees for subdivisions. If it were a commercial project, then we have to submit an overall landscape plan, but there's nothing right now in the town's ordinance that mandates any landscaping on a residential lot. Again, we can talk, Russ and I can talk to the owners about those concerns. I'm sure they don't want to create any, hostility with their neighbors, but there's
No,
not
that-
really a mechanism in place for that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And that's very helpful. So thank you for taking the concerns on board.
You're welcome.
Speaking of neighbors, I noticed on the drawing notes sheet 2, under public health and convenience notes, it says the contractor at his/her expense shall keep the project area free from dust and noise. I'm just curious, what's the method that's going to be used to keep the surrounding area free from noise and dust?
I mean, I think the town has a noise ordinance in place. Basically, what happens is they try to do the best they can during working hours. But then I'm not sure when the noise ordinance kicks in, but that's when we would have to be more careful with any noise. Obviously, construction equipment makes noise.
Right. I think this stated requirement here is probably shouldn't, it's not possible to keep the surrounding area free from noise and probably free from dust. Maybe it says something like.
The dust is important to have because some of these are basically just in case the project goes sideways, the town has what they need to be able to go in and make someone do something. And dust is something that we actually need to keep on there because you would be surprised in some projects if you get construction in a real dry period. Like if we're having a drought, it could get really dry. And if all this dirt is exposed, it just blows up in the air and it ends up all over everybody. So what they do is they water it and it keeps it from blowing around.
Right.
Okay.
Any other comments?
What is the issue before us today? Is to endorse what Lynn has just described? Or is there some other issue?
Well, we had in our provision three recommendations, which is to provide municipal water, sewer, and gas service to the subdivision, which they've done. Use of a stormwater detention device, which has been done, and use of fertilizer and chemicals, which is recommended because of the runoff. Do you wish to add any more recommendations because of the revised plans that we've made?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could I intervene for just a moment? David Markland.
Yes.
I'm here tonight representing the Aquinic Island Land Trust, which owns property that borders the subject property to the east. And the land trust is certainly very concerned about the drainage and the water quality issues associated with this subdivision. Unfortunately, we've only recently learned that the plans for the preliminary application have been filed. We haven't been provided any of the materials directly by the applicant, who was aware that we were interested in this project at the master plan level, and we appeared before the planning board and indicated at that point that we were withholding comments on the proposed subdivision until this stage, while in hopes to be able to review the engineering that was taking place, in particular on the stormwater drainage issues. We have not had the opportunity to review that report, and so can't really comment on that. We would have some questions that we would like posed that came up during the testimony. I was curious, if I understood correctly, that there have been some clearing of trees on the property. Was wondering if either the applicant's attorney or the engineer know whether or not any of those trees, what size those trees were.
Mr. Chairman, if I may suggest, Mr. Martland emailed me earlier today. We have not forwarded anything directly to Mr. Martland, but his client is in a butter and would have gotten notice that the filing had taken place. We understand this has to be reviewed by you, TRC tomorrow, and Aquinic Island Land Trust looks for more time to review the submission. I think we're okay with that. I wouldn't have an objection to the commission reserving any recommendations this evening, continuing it to next month. We'll go to TRC tomorrow, probably get some feedback there. We really don't expect that we'll be heard on Wednesday night because, this is somewhat of a work in progress. And in the interim, I will provide whatever additional information we can to Mr. Martland and, discuss the preliminary plans leading up perhaps to an August planning board meeting. So I think maybe that would be the better course of action. We have no objection to that.
Mr. Martland, would that be useful to you?
Yeah, that sounds perfectly reasonable. Yeah, that would give us an opportunity to review that and raise any concerns directly with Mr. Jackson on any of the materials, and hopefully can address those outside of this forum.
That'd be great.
As of tonight, does any of the commission members have any recommendations they'd like to formally present to the Technical Review Committee before we revisit this next month? We've talked about the trees, about the water runoff. We've talked about the houses. Any other concerns that you'd like to bring up at this point?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, related to the concern that Mr. Pirrick and I stated, I want to ask Lynn, how is the formation of the homeowners association and its responsibilities, how is that going to be formally documented?
That actually may be better answered by Russ.
Mr. Hall, we've already drafted proposed easements in relation to the relocation of the sewer line. So the sewer easement that will be on the subdivision, as well as the stormwater management features. So those have been drafted and submitted to the town solicitor. So those are the primary mechanisms by which, again, in addition to a homeowners association, those are the mechanisms by which, if the owners of the 5 lots neglect maintaining the stormwater management system, the town can step in, perform whatever maintenance is required to make sure the system is working correctly, and they can charge the homeowners for whatever the cost is by the town to do that. So there's a mechanism to make a safety net, if you will, if the homeowners don't live up to the obligations created by those instruments, as well as the association itself.
Okay, and that will be forwarded to the town solicitor, I heard you state, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have a motion to continue next session?
Say again, Mr. Chair, you kind of cut
We have a
out.
motion to continue this the next
Yeah, I would
Meeting.
make that motion.
second.
Second.
All in
Where are we-
favor?
Where are we continuing, Mr. Chair? I'm
We're
clear.
continuing discussion of our recommendations for this proposal until the next month's meeting.
Okay. I understand.
More people want to present their point of view.
Okay.
Say aye.
I,
Howard,
Uh,
anybody opposed?
I don't know why we can't make a recommendation now. I don't know what's further to be discussed.
Okay.
Is there more to be discussed?
We had 3 recommendations from before. We
Yeah.
discussed the other issues and most of the issues resolved. Do you have a particular recommendation to make at this point?
Well, do we, the commission, want to make a further recommendation regarding the tree plan? Is that what we stated, or?
I thought it was resolved, but it is.
Yeah,
What would
I
your
think,
recommendation be?
I would just say on that point that, as I heard, that concern is going to be taken into account, but I would propose that we do wait until we hear what the technical review committee, what comes up at that point. If we have an option to delay until after they've met and perhaps raise some other issues, I'd prefer to hold off until we hear what the TRC says.
And again, Mr. Chairman, I do think that would be a productive and efficient process for us as well, because we'd be able to engage in a little more detail with the land trust after tomorrow's TRC meeting. And again, we don't anticipate that the TRC meeting is going to be one and done. We expected that we would probably have some feedback to work on anyways. So it seems to me you all would be able to make more precise recommendations after you get some feedback from us next month, after going in front of TRC, after working with the land trust over the next month or so, and then you get a better sense as to where the details are in this project.
Okay. Again, we had a vote. We had
I
4.
abstained before, but I concur.
You concur? Okay, then we have a unanimous decision to continue this until the next meeting, pending other committee review, and come up with the recommendations at that point.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Yeah.
All right, and we have one last remaining issue, which was brought up because I received several letters about invasive species in this town. And I'm open for suggestions and discussion.
Right?
Anybody have any ideas? I have
Well,
some.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's 2 questions here that's being asked of us, or being we're mulling right now. The first question is the Conservation Commission the right board or committee to be on this item? You know, we don't, because us by another member. So do we think we are the right commission to be addressing this topic? And then secondly, if we do, is our responsibility, then what do we need to do about it? What do we propose to do about it?
Both those are valid questions. It's in our charter that we're need to evaluate the ecology of the area and the plants involved, make recommendations as such. I had a little blurb from the Conservation Commission for last month in my letter stating that that was the case at that point. It's just never done before. It's brand new for the committee, and it's a relatively onerous obligation. But I'm for ideas. I have.
Well, I feel that we are the right commission to be addressing this. I just didn't know if there were others out there that disagreed. You know, wanted to hear their view if there were disagreements with it.
Well, yes.
I agree. I think I can't think of a better place for this issue to be covered. In terms of how to go about doing it, I think we would need some guidance and probably looking to Rhode Island DEM to see what kind of standards they set, whether there are other similar committees in other municipalities, what have they done? I would say we're probably more in the range of providing an advisory guidance, sending it out to residents. Maybe it's something that goes out on a yearly basis when you get the notice about your, garbage and recycling. Something that would just say, be on the lookout for these types of things. That's where I would think that anything more than that, anything that gets into the realm of enforcement, I think would be beyond our capabilities. but merely to be able to provide or point to advice and guidance that is developed elsewhere, particularly by experts at, whether it's at URI or at DEM, to just provide people a place to go to get information about invasive species.
Great.
And I agree with Melissa's stance on it. I think, I'm not an expert on it by any means, and believe that, educating ourselves and then educating the public is going to be key. And we could have on the town's website information about invasive species that, we're kind of the organizers and get that information publicized and help promote it. But in terms of enforcement, yeah, that's definitely not. I think,
How would you manage invasive species on town property? Or what thoughts be about that?
Maybe that's something for Public Works to address. If we can first get the information together, and then perhaps that's a matter of having a meeting. Maybe we meet with Public Works and say, here's the best advice coming from DEM about how to deal with invasives. What is your practice now? And are there some areas that we could improve to help manage invasive species? And I would imagine there are some local resources. I know Satchwist Point, they have taken action against some invasives there. We may have some other, I don't know what maybe Norman Bird Sanctuary also, but getting some information together. And I think talking about how are things being managed now, and are there areas that we could make some improvements? I would be willing to put in some work on that, to do a little bit of that research and see what we can come up with.
Mr. Chair, if I could have a moment, please, because this is Public Works, and we have managed invasive species down at Second Beach, Satchwist Beach there with we had an invasive sand sedge up in the dune grass, basically a dune grass that we were able to eradicate. Basically, it was almost 2 acres of this this invasive Carrots kobomuji is the botanical name for this particular sand sedge. And it took about 5 years to get it under control, and it cost over $100,000. And that was 2 acres of it. So we do have some experience with this type of work, and I think the conversation I'm hearing right now is very in line with what needs to be done to manage these invasives. So I'll wait to see what you have to say about that.
I think we're more information gathering stage. Anything else? So
I couldn't hear you, Jim.
why don't we gather information about which species we should actually be looking at? Because I don't even know that. I can name a few, but I don't know them.
Yeah, there's a list on the Rhode Island DEM website.
Okay, then that's information to me right now. And get some sort of idea of what the magnitude of this is, and discuss this next month. Does that sound fair?
Yep, I will. I'll take an action to look at what is available on the DEM website at a minimum, and provide that to the commission members.
You or I know something about this, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think both, at least. Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we just get some information and decide from there? And I think a minimum of a pamphlet to the look for in their yard there would be good. But as far as actually taking city time to eradicate these is a whole other issue, which is much more involved. So can we leave it at that for now?
Yep.
Okay, beautiful. All right, if you want to call DEM, we'll go from there. All right. Any other issues we bring up tonight? No, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn. We have a motion, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so adjourned at 6:20, I guess. So thank you all for attending tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
You.
Thanks.
Thanks, Warren.
Thank you.